With the World Series starting tonight, there's only one thing we Diamondbacks fans can think about, and that is what is going to happen to our roster in the days that follow the end of said World Series. Who is going to remain on the team, who will get kicked, and who will leave of their own accord.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, the show where we talk nothing but the D-backs Monday through Friday. Thank you so much for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I am your host, Danon Biggs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. There is a lot to talk about with the World Series. We're not going to do much of that because we're not a World Series podcast. We're a Diamondbacks podcast. I will say everybody's rooting for the Blue Jays. We all know that. So go Blue Jays. I would have preferred the Mariners, but I think the Blue Jays may have a better shot at beating the Dodgers. So we'll see how that goes. I would be super stoked to see the Blue Jays win a World Series. So I have no problem with that. I pretty much had no problem with anybody from the American League, except for maybe the Yankees and maybe the Red Sox. But anybody else, I was like, yeah, go for it. I just don't want the Dodgers to win. I also didn't want the Padres to win either. Ideally, the Phillies, not either. So I have more. You know what? Maybe I was a little bit more selective with who I wanted to win. Who knows? But nonetheless, I think the whole world except for LA is rooting for the Blue Jays. So that's fun. That's fun, I suppose. But we are going to talk about the super fun and exciting, sexy topic of the 40-man roster and what it means for the Diamondbacks and how the World Series, and more specifically the end of the World Series, is going to be very, very important for that. We're also going to talk about how that affects our current lineup and what that's going to be looking like. And then finally, we're going to do what I said we were going to do yesterday, which is cover the history of the Diamondback Silver Sluggers, just to wrap things up. I think it's super fun. It's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the 40-man roster, this is going to be a bit more explainer than most other episodes, I suppose, because this is something that, as a lifelong Diamondbacks fan, I didn't know all of this. There's some of these things here that I was like, oh, that's what arbitration means, and oh, that's what an opt-out is, and that kind of stuff. So I thought this was pretty interesting. So, but anyway, the Diamondbacks, just like every other team, has a list of 40 players that are on their active roster, right? And so they have their 40 players. Now, teams can start trading those players the day after the World Series ends, which will be somewhere between October 29th and November 2nd. Hopefully it's October 29th and, a sweep from the Blue Jays, right? But the morning after the last game of the World Series, teams can start trading. Players become free agents as well after the day after the World Series. And now the players that are at the end of their contract. So they become free agents, boom, the day after the World Series ends. Up until then, they are not free agents. So Zach Gallen is not a free agent yet. But, he's not playing, so it might as well be. But he cannot sign anything. He can't sign with anybody. And within the first 5 days of the off season, so 5 days after the end of the World Series, the teams that have the players have a chance to re-sign them. So the Diamondbacks would have 5 days to re-sign any of their free agents, any team that has a free agent going into a player going into the free agent market has 5 days before other teams can make them offers and sign them. But after the 5 days are up, players can then sign with any other team they want. And that extends until, the season starts. Actually, I think it extends beyond that. Now, one thing that I kind of knew, but maybe not the specifics of, were options. Like you hear club options, player option, mutual option, and I was like, okay, I think they're kind of self-explanatory, but I wanted to look into it just a little bit more, and I did actually learn quite a few things. So, oftentimes you'll see a player will get like a 4-year contract with a player option, or a 5-year contract with a club option. And what that means is it's saying, okay, well, here's the first 4 years. That's part of the contract. And then there's going to be a player option. So if the player decides, I actually want to be a free agent this year, they can absolutely do that. Or if they decide, I want to stay with this team and I like my current contract the way it is, I'd like to stay here for this last year. And the player can do that. Now, a club option is the same thing, but it's up to the team to decide. So if the team decides we want to keep this player for this next year, they can do that. And or if they decide they don't want them, they can just send them off to free agency. However, usually there is a buyout with that, and it's something that they determine when negotiating the contract. So typically, they will or actually, I think they have to every time. If they decide not to keep the player, they will have to buy them out and pay them a percentage of whatever that year's pay would have been. Is kind of the idea. So we have club option, we have player option, which are fairly similar, but just on different sides of the coin. There is a mutual option, which basically means that if they want to extend, if they want to stay with that contract for another year, both members have to agree to do it. So both the team and the player needs to want to do it. And then there is what I didn't really know. I'd heard it, but I didn't really know much about it. A vesting option, which means that the player will need to meet certain criteria in order to go into free agency if they choose. So, like, they have to play a certain amount of innings, they have to have a certain amount of plate appearances, games played, games finished, things like that. That's typically what that means. So, if a player is injured for the entire season, then that might affect that option. So kind of interesting. And all of these are things that are decided like as the contract is being signed. So it's like, okay, so and so is signing a 5-year contract with a player option after this in the 6th year, and then a club option in the 7th year. And the club option is nice because the club can decide to do whatever they want. That's very club friendly, but it also basically that's saying, so then the player, if the player is like does really well during their contract, and then they finish up their contract, their 5 years, and they're like awesome, but they're only getting paid, for what they were 5 years ago, the player would want to go into free agency because they would get really good signing deals, or they'd get really good deals from other teams, but they can't because the club has a club option on them, and they go, no, 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 we want to hold on to you for one more year because we're not paying you as much as you could be getting paid in other places. And so that's very good for us. We like that. So they would hold on to that. A player option, kind of similarly, if the player is maybe kind of in their later years, or maybe they're kind of more stagnant, and they're like, okay, well, I'm currently getting paid this much. If I were to go into free agency this year, I probably won't get paid as much. I probably won't get paid that much in this upcoming year. So I'm going to exercise I'm not going to exercise my player option. I'm going to stay with the team for this last year so that I can stay on this same contract. And then mutual option, there you go. Vesting option, there you go. So anyway, so interesting like tactics that are used, and these have been used more and more lately, but interesting tactics that are used in the negotiating contract process that we're going to see in a couple of our players this year. Another term that we need to know are opt-outs. So that basically, when they write the contract, that gives the player an option to leave, to opt out of their contract at a certain point. So let's say you have a 6-year contract with an opt-out after your 3rd year. So the player could be like, if a player goes on a hot tear and they're awesome, after 3 years, they may be like, you know what? I bet you I could get like I could stay with the team for 3 more years and keep getting paid what I'm getting paid right now. Or I could opt out and potentially get a much longer, much more lucrative contract from another team. And so they weigh the options and they can do that. Also, like a player may want to opt out if they're not happy with the team or the management that they're on or something like that. So they may sign and be like, well, I want an opt out after 2 years because I'm not 100% sure I'm going to like the direction that this team is moving in. And that could happen. Like if a team is in a rebuild phase or something like that, they may be like, okay, they're being pitched, the players being pitched this idea. They're like, we're going to pay you this much and we are building this team around you and da 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 da. It's going to be great. We're going to be great in 2 or 3 years. And he goes, okay, that's great. 2 or 3 years. After the third year, though, if you're not great, then I want out. So I want an opt out in my contract. So that's kind of what that is. Fun stuff. Interesting. And then another thing that I wanted to go over because we've been hearing a lot of this lately is a qualifying offer. And we've been hearing a qualified offer about one player in particular, which we'll get to. And that basically is when the team makes an offer to an outgoing free agent. And what happens if they make that offer and the player rejects it, then they get a draft pick. They get like compensatory. I don't know what that word is. I can see it in my mind, but I can't say it. Sorry, Dad. This is very embarrassing. They get a compensation draft pick, essentially. And I don't know actually if every free agent, if a team could do this with every free agent, but the reason they wouldn't is because they have to make the offer. They have to offer the free agent, the outgoing free agent, the median or the mean of the top 125 paid players in the majors. This year, that mean is 22 million, or it's roughly 22 million. So every year it's a little different. So this year, from what I understand, the the MLB says, okay, if you want a compensation pick in the draft, you need to offer 22 million for a 1-year contract to your outgoing free agents. And if they say yes, then you keep them for another year. If they say no, then they go into free agency and you get an extra draft pick. Sorry, I just smacked my microphone. And for players who are very good, I see why a team would make a qualifying offer because they're like, well, they're probably not going to accept it and we want a draft pick. But like if your player is worth $1 million, you're not going to make a $22 million offer because then they're going to take it, and then you're paying them a lot and you don't get your draft pick and you're stuck with this guy and you're overpaying it. So anyway, but players will have until November 18th to accept a qualifying offer. I don't believe they have to wait until the 18th to sign with other places. Like, I don't think they have to until then to reject the offer. So they could sign with other teams earlier than that, especially because the free agent signing time is 5 days after November 2nd at the latest. So a few more things. We have things like non-tender, which we're going to talk about these in the next segment. This is very important. So pay attention. Non-tenders is when a player is removed from the 40-man roster because of like upcoming arbitration or just to make room on the roster. These players become free agents. So if you have a player who is getting ready to go in for arbitration and you don't want to deal with that, and also you're just like, you know what? Excuse me. Sorry, I'm allergic to arbitration. They're like, you know what, we don't want to have to negotiate with this player. We don't want to have to pay them more than what we're paying them right now. So we're just gonna non-tender them, and they become free agents. And there you go. And then another thing which is similar is outright waivers, which is also when they're removed from the 40-man roster, but it's just to make room. So it's just like, okay, we can only have 40 people on our roster, and we have all these injured players that we need to now put back in our roster, which means we'll now have more than 40. So we're going to need to basically set some guys aside so that we have room for our 40-man roster. But in setting them aside, they now can be signed by anybody. And they're just free game. Any team can sign them. And if multiple teams want to sign them, I didn't know this. If two teams want to sign them, if the Rockies want to sign one player or this player, and the Phillies want to sign this player, it will go to the team with the lower record. So the Rockies would have first dibs over the Phillies. So it was interesting. I didn't know that. So often I imagine the strategy here is if you're like, okay, well, we want to keep all 45 of our players, but we can't have 45 on our roster. So what we'll do is we'll take our 5 least attractive players. Sounds really harsh, and we'll send them out on our outright waivers, so that, and then hopefully nobody signs them. And then when the season is starting up again, the team can then assign them to the minor leagues. So keep them back in the system. So they can bring them right back in, but only if they're not claimed. So if a team is filled to the brim with players and they're like, well, let's send these guys out on outright waivers, other teams will go, oh, that guy's nice, I'll take him. And that happens fairly often. And also the other thing about this is that once this all happens, the non-tenders, outright waivers, and everything like that, the free agency pool opens up dramatically. You don't get like your A-list or even B-list players in this process, but you do get a lot of other players that are, probably minor league ready and attractive to a lot of teams that are building. So interesting to see how that goes. And the thing is, again, like I said, teams need to activate all of their injured players back onto the 40-man roster when this all happens. So when a player is moved to the 10-day injured list or the 60-day injured list, they are removed from the 40-man roster during the season to make room for people who will replace them. So they're still on the team, but they are no longer on the 40-man roster. But now they have to be re-added to the 40-man roster, which we currently, if a team has 40 people on their roster that are all healthy and they have 6 players that are not healthy, well, now you need to move them back into the roster and you have 46 players. You need to get rid of 6, and you may non-tender them. You may outright waiver them. Some of them may be free agents and you don't make a qualifying offer for them, or maybe there's a club option that you don't exercise to get them into free agency or whatever. But whatever you do, you have to have 40 players. And the Diamondbacks are in a bit of a pickle with that one. So we're going to talk about that right after this break. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rougiet comes in. Rougiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiet makes it to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit Rougiet.com/LockedOnMLB. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnMLB to get 15% off your first order. That's Rougiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnMLB. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnMLB so they know we sent you. Rougiet. Stop making excuses and start making moves. As of right now, which is October 24th, I had to look at the calendar, October 24th, 2025, the World Series is starting today. And after the World Series is over, in the 4-game sweep, the Blue Jays 4-game sweeping the Dodgers, whatever, we're going to have to make some moves. So as of now, we have 39 players on our 40-man roster. Sounds good, right? 23 pitchers, 3 catchers, 8 infielders, 5 outfielders. After the World Series is over, Zach Gallen, James McCann, and Jalen Beeks will become free agents, which means they are no longer on our roster, and that will be moved. That will be down to 36 players. However, we have 9 injured players that need to be added back, and that is Burns, Ginkel, Tommy Henry, Justin Martinez, Christian Mena, Montes de Oca, AJ Puck, Waldson, and Pavin Smith. So 8 pitchers and 1 position player. So that now puts us at 45 total players. Now, there's a chance we'll re-sign James McCann and Jalen Beeks. I don't know. I haven't heard any internal rumblings about that. I think they should re-sign James McCann, and I think Jalen Beeks would be a good one to sign as well. So that would put it back up to 47. So we need to scooch 5 to 7 players off of our roster, which will open them up to being signed by other teams. Now, according to, let me see, who was it that wrote this one? Jack Summers over on Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. He wrote an article about this, which I kind of refer to a lot in this, but Jack Summers basically covers this whole thing in pretty good detail and says that there are some pretty good candidates for the outright waivers. And he brings up Elvin Rodriguez, Gus Varland, Kyle Nelson, who are all pitchers, and Connor Kaiser. These are high probability outright candidates. So it's very likely that that's what's going to happen. But we still need at least 1, likely 3 more if we re-sign McCann and Beeks to send out. And he suggests that John Curtis, Casey Kelly, Tommy Henry, Austin Pope, Taylor Rashi could be among those. Ildemaro Vargas in the infield may be one of those. But then he also points out, and it's very interesting, that Kyle Nelson, John Curtis, and Ildemaro Vargas are all arbitration eligible players, which basically means that there is, if you had to scooch anybody off, doing Nelson, Curtis, and Vargas would mean you don't have to, if they do get signed by anybody else, then you don't have to deal with arbitration, which essentially means that there's a chance that we'll have to pay them more this year than we would have had to before. So we're cutting payroll, which means they might be a likely candidate for that, which would mean they'd be more like non-tendered players and less placed on an outright waiver. Again, we could put all these guys on outright waivers, and if they don't get signed, then we just go, okay, you're in Reno, you're back with us, and we'll call you up when we need you. But this does open it up, and I'm like, well, let's not put Tommy Henry, Austin Pope, or Taylor Rashi out there. And I like Vargas. So I'm kind of like, well, yeah, John Curtis, Casey Kelly, Connor Kaiser, Rodriguez, Varland, Nelson. I mean, Rodriguez, Varland, and Nelson, I don't even know that, Kyle Nelson specifically, I don't even know that I can think of a time that they actually pitched this season. So, so honestly, that would probably be fine. But you do have teams that need pitching and would maybe go, okay, you know what? Yeah, we'll take Varland, we'll take Kyle Nelson. So by doing this, we are at risk of losing them completely. But also, after a bit, we can potentially go out and find other players and sign them. But this does open up a lot of questions, and it makes us think, okay, well, what's, a lot can happen here in the next few weeks. So we're interested to see where that goes and how exactly this all works. Because seeing it in practice, I think, is actually very interesting. And this is kind of more in the Moneyball area of cool, like you have people who You have people who you think of their favorite baseball movie, and you're like, well, Angels in the Outfield, which is my favorite. Um, but then you have, your Moneyball because they're like, I love numbers and I love statistics and I love this, which I also I very much like. I like all that as well. But anyway, um, the point that we need to have our 40-man roster again is 5 days after the World Series is over. So that would be when free agents can be signed. So the day we put people out on waivers is the day that they can be taken. So we'll see what happens, and we'll. I like Austin Pope. I like Taylor Rashi. I hope they stick around. I really would love to see Tommy Henry because I feel like he has a lot to give. He's just injured all the time, and he's still figuring it out. But we'll see what happens. I mean, there's a lot that can happen. I also wanted to talk about, though, really quick, some of our players who have options and stuff that we may not be super clear on. So a lot of times you see a list of free agents from the Diamondbacks, like who's going to be a free agent this year. And sometimes Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is on that list. Sometimes he's not. Why is that? Well, that is because in 2026, Lourdes has a player option. So if Lourdes wants, he can in 2026 go, you know what? I want to be a free agent instead. And I'm going to see who's going to sign me. So he could completely legally and everything, decide he doesn't want to be a Diamondback anymore. He wants to see what other teams are going to offer him. However, with his injury right now, and seemingly he doesn't seem to want to leave. He seems to really enjoy being here. He is, and he's not an all-star, super duper. Not to put him down or anything, but yeah, he isn't necessarily a player that people are just clawing at the gates to get. So I think it's unlikely that he'll exercise that, but he could. He absolutely could. And then in 2027, there is a club option. So I imagine the Diamondbacks would want to keep him on for that. So if that ends up being the case, he won't be a free agent until 2028. And between now and then, the Diamondbacks can extend another offer to him to extend his contract and stay with the Diamondbacks even longer. So we'll see what happens. The injury definitely slowed that down a good deal, though. So we'll see how he is when he comes back, which probably won't be until at least the All-Star break, but maybe even further beyond that, which would be a real bummer. But he's most likely here to stay, but he could go. Speaking of people that could go or could stay, Zach Gallen, you've probably heard about a qualifying offer with Zach Gallen, that we're going to extend an offer to him. He's probably going to say no. Here's what it is. So like we mentioned before, teams can make a qualifying offer to a player who's going into free agency. And if they accept it, they stay for another year. If they reject it, then the team gets a compensation draft pick. The offer this year is about $22 million. And the Diamondbacks are reportedly making that qualifying offer. And reportedly, Zach Gallen is going to reject it, which makes sense, seeing who his agent is and how he is likely going to be looking for a long-term, high-paying deal for the next 5-6 years. So Gallen is likely going to do that. There is a chance that he could take it. But again, I don't think he will. I think he's in a position where he's gonna try out the free agency market, which we could make the qualifying offer. He rejects it, and then we could sign him to a different deal later. So like we could re-sign him anyway. So we'll see. I don't think that'll happen because he will be very expensive, and we are cutting back on our payroll. But it could happen. I think we're more likely to sign Kelly than we are Gallen, but we'll see. And then AJ Puck, we've heard rumblings about him. He's going to be a free agent after 2026. So he is still a Diamondback in 2026, but he is arbitration eligible, which does make it like a little bit like, oh, well, the Diamondbacks going to want to pay him. He's injured, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of up in the air, but as of now, he's not going anywhere until after this upcoming season. All right, you guys, we're going to finish things off by looking at all of our silver sluggers that we've had over the years, but we're going to take a small break real quick. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. I promise. Thanks. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So the most recent Silver Slugger in Diamondback history goes to Ketel Marte, who won last year. So he has a chance to win 2 consecutive Silver Slugger awards, which has only ever been done by one other Diamondback, Paul Goldschmidt. Now, the Paul Goldschmidt currently holds the record for most gold or Silver Slugger awards. There have been, let's count this up. I should have done this previously, but there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Silver Slugger award recipients on the Diamondbacks, which isn't a ton, to be fair. But interestingly, let's look at this. Our first Silver Slugger was Luis Gonzalez in 2001. Not a big surprise. We have had 3 pitchers win Silver Slugger awards. That is Micah Owings, Daniel Hudson, and Zach Greinke. And we won't be getting any more, unfortunately. That's one of the things I'm like, oh, but it was fun to watch Zach Greinke like surprise people and be like actually good at hitting. But that's okay. Whatever. It's fine. Universal DH is probably good. We had I think this is, the only person to have more than one. Yeah. So the only person to have more than one Silver Slugger is Paul Goldschmidt, who had 3 consecutive. Sorry, no, he didn't have 3 consecutive. He had 2 consecutive, and then he had 2 stagger. So he had one in 2013, 2015, 2017, and 18. We also have had 2 years where we had 2 Silver Sluggers, and that is 2011 and 2018. In 2011, we had Justin Upton and Daniel Hudson. Very different people. Upton and Hudson. And then in 2018, we had Paul Goldschmidt and David Peralta. So we have the chance, and I think a fairly good chance too. If you saw yesterday's episode, we have a pretty good chance of having another multi-Silver Slugger year with Marte, Perdomo, and Corbin Carroll. I think Corbin Carroll and Marte have it fairly in the bag. Perdomo, I think it's kind of a toss-up. Perdomo, as I mentioned yesterday, definitely has the better like hitter, but Francisco Lindor, who is also in the running, has a lot more power and is a lot more of a slugger, So I think it could go to either. But if we did win all 3, that would be our first 3 slugger year. And it would be the second time that we have 2 consecutive, or a player get 2 consecutive Silver Slugger awards. So very fun, very interesting. And again, that would bump up our number of Silver Sluggers considerably. So very cool, very exciting. And you guys, speaking of exciting, it's Friday. It's the weekend. And today I'm going to be going to another fall league game, hopefully talking to a handful of players. And I'm very excited to report back on that. I have some interesting questions. If you guys have any questions for said players, which I'm not going to say who they are because I don't always know who I'm going to be talking to. But if you have any questions for any players, particularly in the fall league, leave them in the comments of this video and I'll be sure to pass it along and see what they have to say. But you guys, be sure to follow us on X and Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Diamondbacks. We're on YouTube and all of the places you get your podcasts. If you want to see more of me, you can find more of my YouTube channels and projects at my website, slackshack.tv. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. For your second listen, find the all-night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned. Go Blue Jays. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much, and I will see you Monday morning.